William's cries cut through the pre-dawn silence like a blade to my soul. Again, my eyes burned with exhaustion as I stumbled through the narrow hallway of our little wooden house, tripping over my own feet. The boy had been inconsolable for 3 hours, and I had no idea what to do. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. 10 months had passed since Rebecca died, taken by the typhoid fever that devastated Cedar Creek. 10 months of trying to be both father and mother to a boy who was barely 2. 10 months of failing miserably. I picked William up from his crib, his tiny body warm and trembling from all the crying. His diaper was dirty again, the third one tonight. My shaky hands fumbled with the pins as he squirmed, screaming louder. His shirt was soaked with sweat and tears. "Please, son," I croaked, my voice raw and breaking. "Papa doesn't know what to do anymore." The house smelled sour, a mix of spilled milk and dirty clothes that had piled up for days. Dishes stacked in the sink, cold ashes in the stove, dust covering the furniture Rebecca used to keep spotless. Everything was falling apart around me, just like I was. Cedar Creek was waking up outside. I could hear neighbors starting their morning routines, their lives running perfectly while mine crumbled. Mrs. Henderson walked past the window carrying baskets of clean laundry. Mr. Thompson drove his cattle down the main street. Everyone knew how to take care of their families. Everyone but me. William finally quieted down when I managed to warm him, against my chest, but I knew it wouldn't last. Soon he'd need food, and all that was left was a piece of stale bread and half a glass of sour milk. My work at the sawmill barely paid enough to keep a roof over our heads, let alone feed a growing child. That's when I remembered the letter. 3 weeks ago, in a moment of utter desperation, I'd written to a matrimonial service in Denver. My words tumbled onto the paper. Hard-working man seeks woman to care for motherless child. I didn't mention my age or that I was a widower, just that I desperately needed help. I never expected a reply. Who would be interested in a broken man with a crying child in a forgotten Montana town? But something inside me clung to that tiny hope, like a shipwrecked man clinging to a piece of driftwood at sea. The sound of the stagecoach echoed down the main street, cutting through my thoughts. It was too early for the regular mail delivery. I put William back in his crib and walked to the window, pulling aside the torn curtain. A woman stepped down from the vehicle carrying a worn leather valise. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her brown dress showed signs of a long journey. She wasn't young. She looked to be in her 40s. Her features were tired, but there was determination in her steady steps. She looked around, consulted a piece of paper in her hands, and her eyes found my house. My heart pounded as she started walking toward me. 3 firm knocks on the door. I opened it slowly, William whimpering in my arms. The woman stared at me with gray eyes that had seen much of life. "Are you Daniel Crawford?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight Eastern accent. I nodded, unable to speak. "I'm Victoria Mason. I received your letter about needing someone to care for a child." My world stopped. She actually came. This mature woman with wrinkles around her eyes and calloused hands had traveled hundreds of miles in answer to my desperate plea. I didn't expect," I stammered. "Expected someone younger?" She raised an eyebrow. "Well, I expected someone more specific about their needs too. But here we are." Victoria stepped inside, without an invitation, quickly assessing the chaos of my home. Her eyes lingered on the dirty clothes, the piled dishes, the smell that permeated everything. Then she looked at William, who had stopped crying and was observing her with childlike curiosity. "When was the last time this boy had a decent meal?" she asked, holding out her arms. To my surprise, William leaned towards her. Victoria picked him up naturally, adjusting his damp clothes. "How long have you been alone with him?" 10 months, I admitted, feeling the weight of shame. She nodded, no judgment in her eyes. "Well," she said, rocking William gently, "it seems we've arrived just in time." In those first few hours, Victoria transformed our home. While she prepared oatmeal for William and organized the kitchen, I watched in silence, barely believing someone had actually come to help us. She worked with quiet efficiency, her experienced hands knowing exactly what to do. William ate ravenously for the first time in days, smiling at Victoria between spoonfuls. For the first time since Rebecca's death, I heard childish laughter echoing through the house. Later, when William finally slept peacefully, Victoria and I sat at the kitchen table with hot coffee, the first decent coffee I'd had in weeks. "I need to be honest with you," she said, her hands wrapped around the warm mug, "because I had nowhere else to go. A man in Denver rejected me, said I was too old to be someone's wife." 3 weeks later, the letter arrived on an October morning as the leaves began to turn yellow. I recognized the elegant handwriting on the envelope. It was from James Patterson, the Denver merchant who had rejected Victoria. She was in the kitchen making molasses cookies for William when I heard the postman approach. I snatched the mail before she could see it, but something in my behavior must have caught her attention. Victoria watched me over her shoulder as I examined the envelope addressed to her. "Is that for me?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. I handed her the letter reluctantly, watching her expression change as she read the sender. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. I knew I should leave the kitchen, give her privacy, but something kept me standing there. Victoria read in silence, her face growing paler and paler. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and placed it in her apron pocket. "Good news?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the look in her eyes. "He got married," she said simply. "Last week, to a 19-year-old girl, the daughter of a Colorado Springs banker." We fell silent for a moment. William played on the floor with wooden blocks I'd made for him, oblivious to the tension hanging in the air. "I suppose that's what he always wanted," Victoria continued, her voice forcedly casual. "Someone young, beautiful, who can give him many children and represent him well in social circles." Something in the way she spoke bothered me. There was a bitterness there I hadn't seen before, a pain that went beyond simple rejection. "Victoria, you don't need to say anything. Daniel, I know exactly what I am." She slammed the spoon down, a 45-year-old woman, without beauty, without fortune, without prospects, useful for caring for children and keeping houses, but not for being truly desired. "That's not true," she looked at me with a sad smile. "Isn't it? Then why do you never touch me? Why do we sleep in separate rooms like polite strangers? Why do you treat me like an efficient housekeeper instead of a woman?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I didn't know how to respond because, in a way, she was right. In the past few weeks, we developed a comfortable routine. She cared for the house and William. I worked at the sawmill and provided for us. We were practical partners, not husband and wife. I didn't want to presume anything," I said finally. "You came here out of necessity, not choice. I didn't want you to feel obligated to." "Obligated?" She dropped the spoon forcefully. "Obligated to what? To be treated like a real person? To be seen as something more than a convenient solution to your problem?" William stopped playing and looked at us with wide eyes. Victoria immediately softened her voice, forcing a smile for him. "Sorry, darling. Mama Victoria is just talking to Papa." But I had noticed how she referred to herself. Mama Victoria. When had that started? When had she become more than just the woman who cared for us? That night, after William was asleep, Victoria went out to the small garden behind the house. I watched her from the kitchen window, sitting on the bench I'd built under the apple tree. The moon was almost full, bathing everything in a soft, silvery light. I hesitated for several minutes before gathering the courage to go out. She didn't turn when I approached, just kept looking at the stars. "May I sit?" I asked. She nodded without looking at me. I sat beside her, leaving a respectful space between us. "You're right," I said finally. "About how I treat you, about how I've been a coward. It's not cowardice, Daniel. It's honesty. We both know this arrangement is practical, not romantic. I should be grateful to have a roof over my head and a purpose instead of being bitter because I'm not loved. But you are loved." The words came out before I could stop them. Victoria finally looked at me, surprised. "I am." I took a deep breath, knowing I'd reached the point where I needed to be completely honest or forever lose any chance of true happiness. "When you arrived here, I was drowning. Not just in the mess of the house or caring for William. I was drowning in my own grief, in my inadequacy as a father. You didn't just save us, you brought us back to life." Victoria remained silent, so I continued. "In the past few weeks, I've started looking forward to coming home. Not just because the house was clean or because William was well cared for. It was because you would be here. Because your laughter would fill the empty corners that pain had left. Because you transformed our house into a real home again. Daniel, let me finish. I turned to face her completely. You think you're not desired because a foolish man chose youth over substance, but he doesn't know you like I do. He hasn't seen you calm William during nightmares. He hasn't seen you mend patches on your torn clothes with the same care you mend William's. He hasn't seen you transform simple ingredients into meals that make our house smell like home. Tears began to stream down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. You asked me why I don't touch you, why we sleep separately. The truth is, I'm scared. Scared that if I admit how much you mean to me, you'll realize you deserve better than a broken widower with emotional baggage. Something better? Victoria laughed through her tears. Daniel, I spent 22 years caring for my invalid father. 22 years being invisible to any man who could give me a family of my own. When Papa died, I was 43 and had no prospects beyond being an old maid, dependent on the charity of others. She turned to face me completely, the moonlight illuminating her face. You talk about emotional baggage as if it's something terrible. But your baggage is a beautiful boy who needs love and happy memories of a wife you loved enough to mourn her death. My baggage is decades of loneliness and the certainty that I would never be anyone's first choice. You are my first choice now, I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. I am, even knowing I'll never be young again, that I'll never be the beauty Rebecca was, that my body carries the marks of 45 years of life. I reached out and gently touched her face, my thumb tracing the line of a tear. Victoria, when I look at you, I see the woman who brought laughter back to my son. I see hands that work without complaint and a heart that loves without reserve. I see someone who chose to stay when she could have left, who chose to love us when she could have just cared for us. Do you really love me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I do, I replied without hesitation. I love the way you sing to William when you think I'm not listening. I love how you leave extra cookies for me whenever I do something you like. I love how you make our house feel alive again. Victoria closed her eyes, letting more tears fall. I love you too, she murmured. I love how kind you are even when you're exhausted. I love how you look at William like he's the most precious treasure in the world. I love how you treat me with respect even when I don't believe I deserve it myself. I took her hand, intertwining our fingers. Then let's stop treating each other like polite strangers, I said. Let's stop pretending this is just a practical arrangement. Let's get married for real, not for convenience, but for love. Victoria smiled through her tears, a smile that lit up her entire face. Are you sure? Even with all my imperfections? Especially with all your imperfections, I replied, leaning in to kiss her softly. They perfectly match mine. Under the moonlight, in the garden she had planted and cared for, we sealed our commitment not with formal words, but with the silent promise that we had found in each other not just a partner, but a true love that had grown from the most improbable circumstances. Reverend Miller smiled when he saw us enter the small Cedar Creek church on a golden October morning. I held William in my arms, who was wearing his best outfit, a white shirt Victoria had carefully pressed. She walked beside me, wearing a simple navy blue dress that accentuated her gray eyes. Daniel Crawford and Victoria Mason, the Reverend said, his voice echoing in the small space. I am honored to officiate this union. There were no crowds, no elaborate flowers, no grand party, just Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Thompson as witnesses, and a few other townspeople who had become our family over the months. But when I looked at Victoria standing beside me, her eyes shining with happiness, I knew this moment was perfect. Daniel, the Reverend said, do you take Victoria as your wife, to love and protect her, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty, until death do you part? I do, I replied, my voice firm and clear. William chose that moment to babble "Mama," pointing at Victoria, drawing chuckles from the small congregation. Victoria, the Reverend continued, do you take Daniel as your husband, to love and support him, to be a mother to his son and a companion for his life until death do you part? I do, she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. When we kissed to seal the union, William clapped his chubby little hands, making everyone laugh. Mrs. Henderson wiped tears from her eyes, whispering to anyone who would listen how we were a perfect family. That night, in our bedroom for the first time, Victoria brushed her loose hair while I watched from the mirror. The months of hard work and worry had given way to a serenity I hadn't felt in years. "Any regrets?" I asked when she joined me in bed. "About coming to Cedar Creek? About marrying you? About becoming William's mother?" She smiled, laying her head on my shoulder. "Never. This is the first time in my life I feel truly where I belong." William slept in the crib beside our bed, breathing softly. We decided to keep him close for a few more nights until he completely got used to the new dynamic. "Mama," he mumbled in his sleep, turning on his side. "He's been calling you Mama for weeks," I commented, stroking Victoria's hair. "But now it's official." "I always wanted to be a mother," she confessed softly. "When I cared for Papa, I used to dream of having my own children to love and protect. I thought that dream had died along with my youth." "William is your son now, as much as he's mine," I said. "And who knows? Maybe it's not too late for us to have more children." Victoria raised her head to look at me, surprised and hopeful. "You'd want that? Even at my age?" "I'd want anything that brings us more happiness," I replied honestly. "But even if it's just the three of us, we're a complete family." The following months brought a blessed routine. Victoria had completely transformed our home. New curtains on the windows, a flourishing garden in the yard, the smell of fresh bread always present in the kitchen. William grew quickly, his first wobbly steps soon turning into races around the yard as Victoria chased him, laughing. The Cedar Creek community had completely accepted us. The women sought Victoria for advice on cooking and sewing, recognizing her experience and wisdom. The men greeted me with renewed respect, seeing how my family had blossomed under her care. The following winter, when snow covered everything in a white blanket, Victoria gave me the news that would change our lives forever. "Daniel," she said one morning while preparing coffee, "I need to tell you something." Something in her voice made me stop lacing my boots. "I'm expecting a baby." The world stopped. Victoria at 46, pregnant. My first reaction was pure terror. What if something went wrong? What if we lost her like I lost Rebecca? "Are you okay? How do you feel? We need to call the doctor." "Daniel," she interrupted, laughing softly. "I'm fine. The doctor already confirmed it. He said that, although uncommon, women my age can have healthy pregnancies with proper care." William, now 3.5, didn't fully understand what having a little sibling meant, but he got excited when we explained there would be a new baby in the house. "My baby?" he asked, pointing at Victoria's still flat belly. "Our baby," she corrected, kissing his blonde cowlick. "You're going to be a big brother." The pregnancy progressed without complications. Victoria continued caring for the house and William with her usual efficiency, though I insisted she rest more. She laughed at my excessive worries, saying women had been giving birth for thousands of years without so much fuss. Sarah Grace Crawford was born on a spring morning when the flowers Victoria had planted were blooming in the garden. It was a long but uncomplicated delivery, and when the doctor placed our daughter in Victoria's arms, I cried like I hadn't cried since Rebecca's death. "She's perfect," Victoria murmured, tears streaming down her face as she examined every tiny finger. William was fascinated with his little sister, always wanting to help feed her or rock her crib. Victoria divided her attention between the two with the patience of a saint, never seeming overwhelmed or too tired. "How do you do it?" I asked one night, watching her breastfeed Sarah while reading a story to William. "Do what?" "Being a mother to two, a wife, a homemaker, all at once. You make it look so natural." Victoria smiled. That smile I had grown to love more than anything in the world. "Because it is natural for me. This is the life I've always dreamed of having. Every day I wake up grateful to have found you two." The years passed like pages turning in a beloved book. William grew strong and intelligent, helping me at the sawmill when he got older. Sarah developed Victoria's sweet personality and my stubbornness, a combination that kept us always on our toes. In 1900, when William was 18, he married Emma Peterson, the blacksmith's daughter. Victoria cried throughout the entire ceremony, tears of joy at seeing the boy she'd raised become a good, responsible man. Sarah married 5 years later to a young doctor who came to work in Cedar Creek. Victoria, now with graying hair but still the same gentle eyes, helped plan a beautiful wedding in the same church where we had married. "Our children have grown up," she said one night, sitting on the porch watching the sunset. We were 65, our hands wrinkled but still intertwined. "And they've given us wonderful grandchildren," I added, thinking of the 5 little grandkids who filled our house with laughter on Sundays. Victoria smiled, leaning back in the rocking chair I'd made for her. "You know what I'm most proud of?" "What?" "That we built all this together. Not because we were forced by circumstances, but because we chose every day to keep loving each other." She was right. Every morning we woke up and chose to be a family. Every argument ended with forgiveness. Every challenge we faced united. Victoria died peacefully at 80 on an autumn morning in 1920. She was sleeping beside me when she simply didn't wake up. The doctor said it was her heart. It had simply stopped beating after a lifetime of loving tirelessly. I lived 5 more years without her, surrounded by the children and grandchildren she had helped raise. But a part of me died with her that day. When I joined her in 1925, William found among our belongings hundreds of letters we exchanged when one of us traveled, all signed with "Your love forever." Our story began with desperation and practical need. It ended as a testament that true love can shine in the most unexpected places, between the most improbable people, creating something beautiful that endures far beyond our earthly lives. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. The legacy we left behind wasn't just our children and grandchildren, but living proof that it's never too late to find love, purpose, and belonging, even when the world says your best chances have passed.